I've been kicking around Cousin Eddie's ranch in Georgia for as long as I can remember. It's one of those places with more fields than you can count, all bursting with corn and a small peach orchard. Cousin Eddie, well, he's the rugged type, not much for small talk, but the kind of guy who'd give you the boots off his feet. Our family never fussed much with city life. This small town and the ranch are all we've ever needed. His house is pretty old-fashioned, like one of those crayon drawings you made as a kid, with a chimney puffing out smoke and all. The paint's seen better days, and the porch has heard a lifetime of stories. It's cozy, a bit cluttered, but it feels like home to me. Step outside, sidestep the goats, and you'll stumble right into the peach orchard. It's just past the shed that's always one gust of wind away from collapsing into a heap. So there I was, out in the old orchard that stretched beyond the last fence of the ranch. I remember the day was just tipping into late afternoon, and the sun was starting to dip low, casting long shadows between the rows of ancient peach trees. The air was crisp, the kind that's perfect for a hoodie and some worn-out jeans. I'd been out there plenty of times before, but that day felt different. There was this stillness, like the kind of quiet you get when a storm's about to hit. But the sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was just the change of seasons getting to me, or maybe I was just more tired than usual. I had my bucket in hand and I was going about the usual, picking peaches, the ripe ones that practically fell off the branches when you touched them. Some of them were that perfect peachy pink, others were more orange with a blush on one side. As a kid, I used to think they were embarrassed or something, It was peaceful work, the kind that lets your mind wander. But then that feeling crept up on me, that prickly sensation on the back of your neck. I'd reach for a peach and I'd hesitate, feeling eyes on me. I'd look around, expecting to catch a squirrel or a rabbit darting through the underbrush, but there was nothing. Just me in the trees and the faint rustle of leaves. It was when I was reaching up, stretching for this one peach that looked like it was begging to come home with me, that I saw it. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was like part of the tree moved, but not like any part should move. It was slow, deliberate, like watching a turtle cross the road. But this creature was tall, its skin rough and grooved like the bark of the trees around us. Its eyes, they were deep set, like knots in wood, dark and knowing. It was strange, like seeing a face in the wood grain that you can't unsee. And it was watching me. Not in a threatening way, but with a kind of curiosity that you'd show to something new in your environment. I remember freezing, my hand still in the air, holding that peach. My mind was racing. What was this? Why was it here? So many questions flooded my head, but obviously no answers came. All I knew was that it felt old as the trees, maybe older. Like this was its domain and not mine. There was something about it that made me think of the guardians of ancient places that watch over them. It didn't move toward me, didn't make a sound, it just watched. I got the sense that it was figuring out what kind of creature I was. I lowered my hand slowly, not wanting to make any sudden moves. I remembered stories my grandma used to tell me, ones where the old spirits of the land watched over it, and if you showed them respect, they'd do you no harm. I wasn't sure if I believed in those stories, but standing there, with that creature's eyes on me, I wasn't about to take any chances. So I nodded to it, a kind of acknowledgement, and I said quiet, like, "I'm just here for a few peaches. I'll take no more than I need." And I swear I could have imagined it, but it felt like the air around us changed, softened maybe. The creature blinked slowly, like it understood, and then it just sort of melted back into the trees. One second it was there, the next it was just another part of the orchard. I picked my peaches, but I was careful about it. I made sure not to break any branches, not to take too much. And all the while I felt those eyes on me, just out of sight, making sure I kept to my word. When I left, the bucket half full but enough for what I needed, I turned back at the edge of the orchard. I don't know why, maybe to say thank you, maybe just to convince myself I hadn't dreamed the whole thing up. But there was nothing there, just the evening light turning everything to gold and the quiet rustle of leaves. I've been back to the orchard since then, and I've never seen the creature again. But sometimes, when the light's just right and the world's quiet, I feel those eyes on me, and I remember to show a little respect to the old places of the world. You never know who might be watching after all. Evelyn had an uncanny ability to uncover the essence of any locale she visited. As a fervent urban explorer, she reveled in the hidden nooks of her hometown, New Orleans. Her friends often joked that adventure was practically her middle name. However, the vibrant streets and the melodic hum of jazz were no longer enough to satiate her curiosity. She yearned for something untamed, something whispering secrets of the natural world. That's how, on an early Saturday morning with the first light just touching the horizon, she found herself renting a kayak at the edge of the Louisiana Bayou. She had heard the local legends, tales woven into the fabric of late-night conversations, and the wide-eyed astonishment of the daring few who believed them. But Evelyn wasn't here for the stories. She sought the quiet pulse of nature, the dance of sunlight on water, and the profound solitude only such wild expanses could provide. As she paddled, the cacophony of the city faded to a distant echo, replaced by the harmonious symphony of the swamp. Her strokes were slow and deliberate, mirroring the gentle sway of the cypress trees. The water surface was a perfect mirror, reflecting an inverted world, and for hours it was just Evelyn, her kayak, and the infinite stretch of water and sky. Then a shift occurred, not in the breeze or the weather, which remained serenely calm, but in the water behind her. A ripple, subtle yet unmistakable, and an unshakable feeling that something was out of place. Evelyn paused, her paddle suspended midair, and glanced back. At first, she saw nothing but the ripples dissipating into stillness. Then, scanning the water's edge, she noticed it, a long, sinuous neck just breaking the surface, its scales gleaming with an ethereal glow. The creature moved with an elegance reminiscent of other aquatic animals, its sleek body slicing through the water silently, leaving only the faintest of ripples. The neck she had seen was but a small part of its length, the remainder concealed beneath the surface, hinting at a creature of significant size. Its head was small and delicate compared to its neck, adorned with a fringe of delicate reed-like tendrils that fluttered with each movement, perhaps sensing the murky depths of the bayou. The creature's mouth was a thin, closed slit, adding to its mysterious aura. It moved with a sense of purpose, but without haste. Evelyn blinked, and in that brief moment the creature vanished, leaving behind a gentle splash. Her heart pounded, her mind a whirlwind of disbelief. Rational thought clashed with the surreal image imprinted on her mind. She scoured the water, but the creature was elusive. Every glimpse she thought she caught vanished, as if it were playing with her, testing her resolve. Hours passed, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Evelyn found herself back on solid ground. The kayak lay beside her as she sat on the dock, her thoughts still adrift in the bayou with the enigmatic creature. An old man approached, his eyes reflecting years of untold stories. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked, his voice raspy but gentle. Evelyn nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "What was it?" The old man settled beside her, his gaze lost in the fading ripples. "The Guardians," he said. "They've been here longer than any of us. They watch over these waters, protectors of the deep and all its secrets." "Guardians?" Evelyn echoed, a skeptical eyebrow raised. "Some call it folklore. Others say it's the ramblings of the old and superstitious," he continued. "But there are things in this world, young lady, that don't need our belief to exist. They just are. Those creatures have been seen for generations. They reveal themselves to those who come with respect for this place." Evelyn sat in silence, absorbing the weight of his words. She realized her adventure had veered into the realm of the extraordinary, into stories whispered with reverence and a touch of fear. As night enveloped the bayou and she made her way back to the city, the experience embedded itself in her mind, a mystery that wouldn't let go. She knew she would return, drawn by the enigma of the Guardians, by the allure of the unknown now, as much a part of her as the heart of New Orleans was. For now, Evelyn was content knowing there was still magic in the world, real and tangible, waiting just within reach for those brave enough to seek it. The creature in the bayou, with its serpentine neck and glowing scales, had ignited a new thirst for the untold stories lying hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered. I live in Green Hills, Ohio, and my friend Jenny loves diving into supernatural and conspiracy theories online. One day, she burst into my house, excited about something she found on a forum. To me, that was already a warning sign. Jenny said there were rumors about an abandoned underground research facility in the Wayne National Forest. I laughed it off, never having heard anything like it, but she persisted and tried to persuade me to check it out. Despite my skepticism, she showed me the forum thread, complete with pictures from the alleged site. Coordinates and landmarks were provided for those daring enough to explore. Interestingly, there were also reports of a strange creature sighted in the area. People speculated it was connected to the hidden facility. Your listeners might know about the Ohio Grassman. There are plenty of stories about it on your channel, with sightings all over the state. Ohio is known for its Grassman sightings, even in Green Hills. I'd heard stories from old-timers, but had never seen it myself. The creature people described sounded like the Grassman, a Bigfoot-like being. Jenny didn't want to go alone, and I finally agreed on the condition she'd buy me a large pepperoni pizza from Donato's. The Wayne National Forest spans thousands of acres, and we followed the map and coordinates Jenny had, leading us down a trail that narrowed and went deep into the woods. I quickly lost my bearings and started to worry. As we hiked, we heard rustling nearby. I was concerned because there are bobcats and bears in the forest, and I was sure we were off any official trail. I also caught a whiff of something foul, like rotting meat and sulfur. Jenny seemed unfazed, so I kept quiet. Then we heard another sound, one that was strange and unsettling, like a cackling hyena. It was close. I suggested we turn back, but Jenny insisted we were near and pointed out a large oak tree with strange carvings, matching the forum's description. We finally found a small hill with a concrete door hidden under foliage. I couldn't believe it, and Jenny couldn't hide her smugness. However, I was still worried about whatever made those strange sounds. Jenny, undeterred, pulled open the door and went inside. I reluctantly followed, using our phone's flashlights to see. The place was mostly empty, except for some old beer cans. From the outside, you wouldn't guess how large the place was, but as we ventured further, it became clear it was a sprawling complex. We found several rooms with old, dusty tables, cabinets, and gurneys. It looked like a medical or research facility. Jenny took numerous pictures. The place hadn't been used in decades, and I couldn't fathom how it remained a secret. Jenny mentioned the forum users believed the government conducted secret experiments here during the Cold War. Previously, I would have laughed, but at that point, anything seemed possible. She was determined to find something to prove these theories, but aside from old, rusted equipment, there was nothing. I was hesitant to go further, as the place was a confusing maze. Jenny mocked me, but then we heard noises ahead. It sounded like metal clattering, as if someone was knocking things over. I grabbed Jenny and tried to head back, but she shook me off and called out, taunting whoever it was. I thought she was crazy. Then we heard it again, that hyena-like cackle echoing through the concrete maze. It grew louder, and for the first time Jenny hesitated. That's when we saw it. At the end of a long corridor, a massive figure emerged. Our flashlights weren't strong enough to get a clear look, but it was definitely an animal, moving on all fours. It was huge, with shaggy dark fur and a menacing face. Jenny snapped a picture, and when the flash went off, a guttural laugh erupted from the creature as it stood on its hind legs. We saw its upper body was humanoid, with arms more muscular than a bodybuilder's. It was enormous, easily over 7 feet tall. Jenny screamed, and we both bolted. We heard the creature's heavy footsteps behind us getting closer. We reached the entrance, slammed the door shut, and kept running down the narrow trail. As we ran, we heard that eerie laugh again and something moving in the bushes behind us. Who knows if it was the same creature or another one? We finally reached the main trail and continued to our car. Nothing followed us. We stood in silence, catching our breath. I struggled to process what had happened, but Jenny grinned. She was thrilled about our encounter and the proof she believed she had, but then her face fell as she searched for her phone with all the pictures. It was gone. She must have dropped it in the bunker or the forest. I told her there was no way we were going back. She got angry and demanded to know why I hadn't taken any pictures. I just shrugged. She berated me all the way back to town but kept her promise and bought me the pizza from Donato's. Turns out, I had worked up quite an appetite after nearly being attacked by the grass man. A week later, Jenny told me the forum thread had been deleted. She thought our encounter had something to do with it, like the government was still watching the place. I thought it was for the best. No one should be snooping around there anyway. My job is quite unusual. I'm a nocturnal wildlife researcher specializing in the study of bat populations in the Pacific Northwest. Bat numbers have been declining, and I'm dedicated to reversing this trend. This incident occurred in mid-August. I was deep within the temperate rainforest near Olympic National Park, an expansive wilderness in Washington state. My work involves tracking bat activity, examining their feeding patterns, and monitoring their population numbers. This typically means spending nights in remote locations, surrounded solely by nature. One night, I was setting up my ultrasonic detectors, devices that capture bat echolocations. Alone as usual, I relied on my headlamp and the dim glow of my equipment. The night was clear, the stars were out in full display, and everything seemed calm. Then, unexpectedly, I heard a strange sound. It wasn't the high-pitched chirping of bats. This was a low, rhythmic humming like a generator running in the distance, but smoother and more deliberate. Driven by curiosity and a bit of a researcher's instinct, I packed up some gear and moved toward the sound. I navigated through the thick underbrush, trying to stay quiet. The sound grew louder and more distinct until I saw it. In a clearing, I encountered something inexplicable. It wasn't an animal, nor any natural phenomenon I'd ever seen. Hovering just above the ground was an oval-shaped object, emitting a soft, pulsating light. The surface was smooth, almost metallic, reflecting the moonlight in a way that seemed to bend the light around it. I stayed hidden in the shadows, watching. It felt like this object had a presence, almost as if it was alive. The humming sound resonated through the ground, vibrating in my chest. I was considering my next move when suddenly the object shifted. It opened, revealing tall, slender beings. They moved with an unsettling grace, inspecting the area with purpose. Their movements were precise and calculated, like scientists conducting field research. They collected samples from the ground, plants, and even the air. Occasionally, one would pause, lift a hand, and a device they held would light up, emitting a soft glow. I tried to remain as still as possible, hidden in the shadows, not wanting to attract their attention. But part of me was fascinated. As a researcher, the need to understand the unknown drives me, and this was the epitome of an unknown encounter. After a while, I noticed their movement had a pattern, bringing them closer to my hiding spot. Panic set in. I wasn't prepared for a face-to-face encounter. What do you do in such a situation? Say hello? Run? Just as I was contemplating my escape, something incredible happened. One of the beings, the one closest to me, stopped. It turned its head slightly as if it heard something. For a second, I thought it had detected me. But then, it looked up at the sky, and the others followed, standing perfectly still, gazing upwards. I couldn't resist. I looked up too. A shooting star streaked across the sky, brilliant and bright. It was a beautiful, serene moment. Then, as quickly as they had paused, they resumed their work. After a few more minutes, they seemed to complete whatever they were doing. They regrouped and headed back to the object. As they approached, it glowed brighter. The humming sound increased in intensity, and I felt the vibration in the air. Then, in a flash of light, they were gone. The object shot up into the sky at an impossible speed, disappearing into the night. I was left alone in the clearing, surrounded by the quiet sounds of the forest. It was a mix of awe, fear, and an overwhelming sense of wonder. I knew what I had seen was extraordinary, something that would stay with me for the rest of my life. As the first light of dawn broke, I packed up my equipment and headed back to camp. I've returned to that spot several times since then, hoping for another encounter. But it's been quiet with only the normal sounds of the forest. I even investigated the area to see what they had been examining, but nothing stood out as unusual. So, that's my story. I know it sounds unbelievable, and part of me still struggles to believe it myself. But it happened. I've kept this mostly to myself. Not many people would believe a story about aliens in the Pacific Northwest wilderness. Every time I go out now, every time I set up my equipment, I wonder, maybe they'll come back, maybe they won't. But one thing's for sure, our world is headed in a different direction than we think. And that's it, the full account of my encounter. It's out there now for you to make of it what you will. Marcus had always been a skeptic. Growing up, he laughed off ghost stories and horror movies, dismissing them as flights of fancy designed to scare the gullible. He maintained this skeptical mindset all through his college years, focusing on his studies and graduating with honors in psychology. Little did he know that his beliefs were about to be tested in ways he could never have imagined. Fresh out of college, Marcus found a job as a research assistant at an old, prestigious university in a small town. The university was renowned not just for its academic rigor, but also for the numerous ghost stories that seemed to be entwined with its history. The main building, a sprawling Gothic structure with ivy-covered walls and turrets, was said to be haunted by the spirits of students and professors who had met untimely ends. Marcus shrugged off these tales, attributing them to overactive imaginations and the eerie ambiance of the centuries-old campus. His job required him to stay late, often working alone in the ancient library, cataloging and digitizing old manuscripts. One particularly stormy night, as Marcus was engrossed in his work, a sudden chill swept through the library. The lights flickered, and a deep sense of unease settled over him. He tried to shake it off, but an odd noise from the corner of the room made him pause. It was a soft whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. He looked around, expecting to see a fellow researcher or a janitor, but the library was empty. Determined to focus on his task, Marcus returned to his work, but the whispering persisted, growing louder and more insistent. His heart pounded, and he felt a cold sweat trickle down his spine. He turned around slowly, and to his horror, he saw a figure standing in the shadows, a translucent, ghostly apparition of a young woman in Victorian attire. Marcus froze, his skepticism wavering in the face of this undeniable apparition. The ghostly figure began to move toward him, her lips moving as if she were trying to speak. Summoning his courage, Marcus forced himself to listen. "Help me," the ghost whispered, her voice echoing through the library. "Find the truth." Unable to ignore the plea, Marcus nodded, and the ghost faded away, leaving him alone in the dimly lit room. Shaken but resolute, Marcus decided to investigate. He delved into the university's archives, uncovering a tragic story about a brilliant young woman named Eleanor who had died under mysterious circumstances in the late 1800s. Her death had been ruled a suicide, but rumors had always persisted about foul play. As Marcus dug deeper, he uncovered old letters and diary entries that hinted at a scandal involving a prominent professor and a cover-up. The more he read, the more he felt a connection to Eleanor's story. He realized that her spirit was trapped, seeking justice and the truth about her death. Determined to help her, Marcus compiled all the evidence he could find and presented it to the university authorities. His findings sparked an official investigation, and after months of scrutiny, the truth was finally revealed. Eleanor had been murdered, and her death had been staged to look like a suicide. The university issued a formal apology and erected a plaque in her honor, acknowledging the injustice she had suffered. On the night of the dedication ceremony, Marcus returned to the library. As he stood before the plaque, he felt a presence beside him. He turned to see Eleanor's ghost, now serene and radiant, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like a gentle breeze. "I can rest now." With that, she vanished, leaving Marcus alone in the quiet library. He stood there for a long moment, reflecting on the experience.